Mississippi, a state that surprised us in the best way. We ate incredible Southern food, visited the birthplace of Elvis, explored some fascinating historic sites, and even got to experience Halloween in the Deep South. So, continuing on our American road trip, we're now on stop number 4, and this is our second of the Twin States. We actually visited Mississippi last year. We came to see a Monster Jam show in South Haven, but this time we wanted something different to slow things down and explore more of the local Meridian area, which is also known as the Queen City. So we arrived here just in time for Halloween, which in the South is an experience. And what we love most about Mississippi is how you can really embrace that Southern hospitality this part of the world is renowned for. The people, the food, and the relaxed way of life is definitely what makes Mississippi one of our favorite states. For those of you who haven't visited the town of Meridian, this is a great stop for a weekend or just a couple of days. And it turns out there's a lot more history here than I actually realized. So this area was originally home to the Choctaw Nation, and they lived here long before European settlers arrived. But in the 1830s, the US government wanted more land in the South for farming and expansion. So, under President Andrew Jackson's Indian removal policy, the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek was signed between the US government and the Choctaw Nation. This treaty forced the Choctaw to give up millions of acres of their ancestral land here in Mississippi and some in Alabama in exchange for land in what is now Oklahoma. Now, even though it was called a treaty, it wasn't a fair agreement, and it actually became one of the first major forced removals and part of what we now refer to as the Trail of Tears. So thousands of Choctaw people were made to leave their homeland and travel west, with many dying along the way. And obviously this caused a lot of deep suffering for the community. So if we then fast forward a little bit to after the Choctaw were pushed out, settlers moved in, and over time the town of Meridian began to grow. The town began first as a small settlement, but it grew quickly in the 1800s when the railroads came through. And back then, trains were everything. They moved people, goods, supplies, and even armies. So becoming a major railway hub made Meridian incredibly important almost overnight. And that's why during the American Civil War in the 1860s, Meridian became a major target. The northern states, so the Union, were fighting to keep the country together and over time to end slavery, while the southern states, the Confederacy, were trying to break away and to keep slavery. And because Meridian was such an important rail hub, it was right in the middle of that struggle. So, in 1864, a Union general named William Sherman launched an attack here. So, Sherman was a leading commander for the Union. His strategy was simple, but it was brutal. Cut the South's ability to fight by wrecking railroads, depots, and supply lines. Meridian was a key rail hub, so it became one of his major targets. He tore up the tracks and the warehouses, and he supposedly declared Meridian no longer exists. But what's incredible is that the people rebuilt the rail system and got the trains running again in less than a month. And that shows how strategic and determined this town was. After the war, Meridian went through a golden era. From the late 1800s into the early 1900s, it actually became the largest city in Mississippi, driven by industry, trade, and all that railway traffic. Then the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, and like much of the South, it hit hard. Factories closed, rail businesses slowed, and investment never quite returned to that same level. Today, that means part of Meridian still feel like a window into the past, and I honestly love that about places like this. Now, of course, any good day out needs good food, and if you're coming to Meridian, you have to eat at Weidmann's. It's the oldest restaurant in Mississippi, opened by a Swiss immigrant back in 1870 and passed through the Weidmann family for generations. It's now owned by local investors, but they've kept the original charm, the menu, and that old school feel. Each table has a little crock of peanut butter and crackers, a tradition that started during World War II when butter was rationed and in short supply. And you can even buy them little crock pots as souvenirs. The atmosphere, the history, and the staff make it such a lovely place to visit. And if you go, you have to try the fried green tomatoes with crawfish and shrimp sauce. But be warned, portions here are huge. So unless you're absolutely starving, make it a sharing starter. You'll find it right next to a giant mural of Jimmy Rogers, who was born here in Meridian in 1897. If you haven't heard of him, he's considered the father of country music and influenced legends like Elvis and my husband's favorite band, Lynyrd Skynyrd. So yes, we 100% stopped for a family photo. Nearby is the 3-foot building, a gorgeous 1929 Art Deco skyscraper that's now a hotel. Also, the restored Grand Opera House, which really shows how the city is trying to preserve its past while building for its future. Yes, some parts feel a little bit tired and could do with a bit of investment, but the murals, the wall art, the historic buildings, they all tell the story of a city that's proud of its roots and its creativity. And if you do visit, make sure you look out for the brightly coloured carousel horses. So they're dotted around all over the town, and they're part of a public art project called Around Town Carousels Abound. They're inspired by the city's historic Denzel Carousel. They're fun, bright, whimsical, and they raise money for local children's charities. We ended our visit of Meridian at the Meridian Children's Museum, and this was a little treat for Isabel because she had been so good for our entire visit. And honestly, I think I had just as much fun as the kids. There's lots of hands-on play and even little bits of local history mixed into the exhibits. And for the record, you won't hear many Brits saying cheerio. A simple hello will do just fine if you're visiting the UK anytime soon. So next up, we headed north to Tupelo, the birthplace of Elvis Presley. So we didn't have time on this trip to do Graceland properly, so we decided instead to come see where it all began. And honestly, I'm really glad we did. We walked around the tiny house he was born in, explored the museum, and learned about how much the African American blues scene in Tupelo influenced his sound, blended with gospel and his love of country music. Now, I didn't know this, but early in his career, he was even called one of the hottest new names in country music, which feels strange when you think about him as the king of rock and roll. The whole site felt humble and genuine, nothing over the top, just a simple, really meaningful place, which is nice because it is a touristy place. Now, for our final stop, we made a really quick visit at the Tupelo National Battlefield. It's small, but it ties right back to General Sherman, who I mentioned earlier when he launched the attack on Meridian. So just to connect the dots, after destroying the railroads and supply network in Meridian, Sherman later pushed towards Atlanta in what was known as his March to the Sea. His strategy in the Civil War was to break the Confederacy's ability to fight by cutting off their supplies and their transport routes. The battle here in Tupelo in 1864 was a Union victory that helped stop Confederate forces from attacking Sherman's supply lines as he moved deeper into the South. So even though this site is tiny, it played its role in keeping his campaign moving and ultimately helping the Union win key battles later in the war. So that is everything we did this time, and there is still so much more we need to explore in Mississippi, but we are coming back next year. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know below in the comments. But right now, we're heading into our next stop, Arkansas, and I am so excited for this one. We're heading to hot springs, and I recently read that NASA used the natural hot spring water to sterilize the containers that held moon rocks after the Apollo missions. Now, I need to do more reading on this. I'm not sure how true that is. It was just a bit of light reading. But if you know any more about that story, please let me know below. And if you've been enjoying this road trip with us, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next stops. And please drop your Mississippi recommendations below because we are definitely coming back. Thank you for watching, and a big thank you to my channel members, and I will see you in Arkansas.